controversial things, and so I like this idea of bringing up the Belt and Road Initiative of China. And so this is a great topic, great thesis. These are Brian's words, Brian John's words. I'm going to have to hold the computer close because I can't read. I would like to thank Mr. Wade and Ms. Maymay as my thesis teacher, Miss Anita as my thesis advisor, and all the teachers who guided me for my thesis. I also want to thank Mr. Rio and Ms. Haiti as my panelists today. Lastly, I would like to thank my parents and friends for always supporting and encouraging me while working on this thesis. His title is Beneath the Rising Red Sun, the Hidden Soft Power Under China's Belt and Road Initiative Investment Program. All right, give me a couple of seconds, set up the timer. I'll tell you when you can start. All right, you can start when ready.
3 hours stuck at traffic, long, exhausted, and barely moving. And then suddenly, the same journey takes less than 45 minutes. That is what Whoosh is all about. How many of you have ever tried Whoosh before? I bet most of you have experienced the fast-moving train that connects Bandung and Jakarta in under 45 minutes. Very efficient, isn't it? But here is the question nobody seems to be asking. What actually happens behind this project? What kind of agreement, costs, and long-term impact that comes with it? In reality, our future generations may still bear the financial burden of the project's massive $7.4 billion cost. That's not progress. That's a burden passes down in silence. The Chinese investment pattern have been seen in several other countries. At first, everything was beneficial: strong investment, modern infrastructure, and rapid economic growth. However, over time, consequences began to appear. So, what is truly happening? To further examine how this pattern continues, we must first go back and see its background and development. Empires rise, fall, and reshape themselves to power and dominance. Therefore, the empire of the world keeps changing over time. Among them, China has stood as 1,000 of years as a strategic and powerful civilization known for its Silk Road project. The Silk Road project, started by the Han Dynasty, was not just any trade route. It was a bridge connecting between the East and the West. China, a strong empire during its time, developed indirect trade connections via intermediary traders, which strengthens the growth of trade along the Silk Road. That partnership strengthens global exchange and enables the Silk Road to grow. Major empires such as the Roman, Persian, Mongol, and Chinese dynasties keep the Silk Road active for centuries. It moves goods, ideas, culture across continents. China expanded its influence to trade, growth, and economic ties. After the Ottoman Empire blocked the Silk Road, China did not stop spreading its influence. China actually shifted to maritime trade and expansion. China kept spreading its influence beyond military means. In 2013, President Xi Jinping revived this ancient strategy and named it the Belt and Road Initiative, or the BRI. The BRI is a modern imagining of the Silk Road, connecting China to regions across Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond. This massive project builds roads, ports, and rails across Asia, Europe, Africa, Oceania, and Latin America. By 2023, over 140 countries had joined or signed agreements related to the BRI, which expands China's global reach. The project's main purpose is to improve global trade and connections to large-scale infrastructure projects. China has invested and financed hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure projects across more than 140 countries related to the BRI. At first, it looks like an opportunity too good to refuse. Many countries accepted it, hoping for development and growth. One example is Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, where the country was not able to repay the loans and the port was later given to China under a 99-year ownership agreement. Another example is Zambia, where it has debt-related issues due to infrastructure projects. Similar situations have been seen in several African countries, where many projects are funded through Chinese loans. According to several debt lenders, China's debt system is different from that of other countries, where countries cannot negotiate debt collectively. In some cases, agreements allow China to gain control of a country's asset when they are unable to repay their loans. Before we move further, we must first define soft power as a country getting other countries to want what it wants. Soft power is different from hard power. Hard power can be defined as the power of ordering others to do what it wants. The BRI is an example of a modern soft power as it expands Chinese influence to economic cooperation rather than to war. Another term to be defined is debt dependency, which means the state of being over-reliant on borrowed money to function. Like a spider's web, once a country is drawn in by partners of development, escaping its long-term financial consequences becomes nearly impossible. Data shows large amount of debt across Angola, Ethiopia, Egypt, and Kenya. In a subset of 23 countries, these countries are significantly or highly vulnerable to debt distress. When a country becomes too indebted, its national income may decrease because most of its budget is used to pay debt instead of investing in education, health, or infrastructure. Therefore, countries should be aware of China's Belt and Road Initiative as it could cause negative economic, social, and political consequences. First, the Belt and Road Initiative caused long-term harm in economic aspects. The BRI is causing countries to be overly dependent on Chinese products. This dependency occurs because many of these countries are not self-sufficient in processing their own raw materials into finished goods. Take South Africa as an example. The country's major import is from China at 23%. And this pattern strongly linked to BRI-funded infrastructure projects that has deepened trade ties and open market to Chinese goods. China exports low-cost goods at a lower price, which directly affects African manufacturers because consumers tend to choose the more affordable option, making African-made products too expensive to compete. Countries like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Indonesia also rely heavily on Chinese imports. In fact, China-Africa trade alone reached over $282 billion in 2023, showing just how heavy that reliance has become. The evidence is clear. When countries keep exporting raw materials and importing finished goods back, they lose the chance to build their own local industries. If they continue relying on imports, they will slowly become economically dependent on the manufacturing country, rather than achieving their own independence. Countries become too dependent on BRI, which causes harmful long-term effects like economic dependency instead of economic independence. And this overdependence is exactly how China continues to expand its soft power through the Belt and Road Initiative. Furthermore, BRI is causing unsustainable debt, which negatively affects developing countries. Some BRI projects use business-to-business schemes like Indonesian WUSH, which reduce direct pressure on the national budget. However, when these projects run into financial trouble, the government is expected to step in. WUSH itself requires state intervention to PMN, meaning future generations end up paying for it. The borrowing costs from China are relatively expensive and could create significant long-term debt burden. BRI debts are harder to repay compared to other bank loans, and one-third of low-income developing countries face a high risk of debt distress. Countries tend to accept BRI loans due to the necessity of infrastructure. But if they cannot pay their loans, they risk losing their national assets. Zambia faced a serious debt restructuring challenges after accumulating heavy BRI-related loans due to energy and transport infrastructure. When countries spend most of their budget paying off debt, it drains their national resources, when causes financial weaknesses, and making it even harder to act independently from China's economic or political influence. In addition, BRI creates unfair market competition, which is only beneficial to Chinese companies. Chinese companies have lower production costs, leaving local industries unable to compete. ASEAN's trade deficits with China now exceed $190 billion, reflecting the deep imbalance in regional trade. When local industries fail to compete, they tend to shut down, causing future problems such as unemployment and labor instability. Clearly, BRI leads to long-term economic damage since the national economy become weaker, and when local industries cannot compete, putting China in a stronger position to expand its soft power over other countries. Second, countries must be cautious of BRI since it causes political disruption, threatening stability to geopolitical tension, weakening national sovereignty, and reducing transparency in governance. BRI's political pressure is a way for China to show its soft power, and as a result, countries involved in BRI must slowly lose control over their own political decisions. One major issue is that BRI increased geopolitical tension for borrowing countries, since borrowing countries are put in the middle of a global power competition between China and the United States. Countries such as Sri Lanka and Pakistan have faced increasing pressure balancing their relationship with both powers, creating diplomatic challenges and limiting their ability to remain neutral. Instead of remaining neutral, countries involved in BRI may face pressure to choose sides, which directly harms their diplomatic relationship and pushes them further into China's sphere of influence. Having projects with BRI will increase geopolitical tension by placing borrowing countries in the middle of a global power competition. Another issue is that BRI's lack of transparency. 30% of Chinese loans include set-off rights, meaning lenders can directly take funds owed to repay debt without a formal collateral. Many BRI negotiations happen behind closed doors, which limits the involvement from local government and the public. Indonesia publicly introduced WUSH to society. However, many financial details and long-term obligations were still difficult for the public to access. Without transparency, citizens cannot know what their government is agreeing to, which weaken democratic processes and increase public distrust of the government. A lack of transparency could lead to an imbalance of political power and unfair agreements that they never voted for. Lastly, BRI weakens national sovereignty. While a country initially choose to participate voluntarily, long-term debt obligation can leave them with little choice but to surrender over their key assets or adjust their policies to satisfy their creditor. In Indonesia, Sri Lanka agreed to release the Hambantota port to China for 99 years, a decision driven not by failure but by the inability to repay its mounting debt obligation. That is not just a financial loss. That is a country losing control over their own strategic assets. In Zambia, concerns arose over China's potential gaining influence over ZESCO, which is their national electricity company, due to the growing debt obligation. China's influence is not only limited to economics, it also affects borrowing countries' decision making, and as a result, a country's ability to protect its own political autonomy is reduced. Third, countries should be skeptical about BRI since it causes social problems that goes beyond surface level development, causing environmental damage, health risks, and labor conflict that affects local people and their daily life. BRI projects cause significant environmental damage. Projects involving coal and heavy industry contributed to carbon emission, environmental degradation, and habitat destruction. In Indonesia, land clearing disrupted local ecosystem and nearby communities. In Pakistan, rapid infrastructure development under the CPEC, or the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, contributed to increased air pollution and environmental degradation. Communities experience loss of farmland, reduced access to natural resources, and poor living conditions, which increase social tension and instability within these communities. BRI also causes serious health risks for local people. Pollution from BRI projects affect air, water, and soil, contributing to respiratory disease, waterborne illness, and other long-term health chronic diseases. What makes it worse is that 32 countries participating in BRI have weak public health governance capacity, meaning many governments are not prepared to handle this health crisis, making the impact even more severe and putting more pressure on already struggling communities. Lastly, BRI weakens labor conflict. Many projects bring in foreign workers, instead of prioritizing local workers, which reducing job opportunities for local communities. In Ethiopia, for example, Chinese-run construction projects was reported to employ predominantly Chinese laborers, leaving local workers with limited opportunities despite the project being built in their own soil. Even when labor violations occur, local governments often lack of legal authority to hold foreign companies accountable, meaning workers are left unprotected and unfair treatment continues without a proper solution. When local people feel replaced in their own country, frustration builds, leading to social division and long-term labor problems. As a result, BRI projects weaken social stability and create long-term damage that goes far beyond just economic. However, some might argue that BRI is a legal development project that countries voluntarily agreed to. This is partly valid, since government often seek BRI investment to fill infrastructure gap that they cannot address on their own. Even so, legal standing does not always protect a country from long-term harm. When contracts are made without full public accountability, economic risk increases. One article notes that debt problem can also arise from the misconduct of local elites, showing that legality alone does not prevent dependency. Legal agreements can still allow soft power influence, which causes long-term risk. Others argue that BRI focuses purely on development, not political control. This is partly valid. However, BRI is often labeled as Beijing's strategic effort to boost its soft image as a constructive actor, meaning development itself becomes a tool to expand China's political leverage, gradually shifting a country's decision towards China's broader strategic influence. Another argument is that BRI improves social conditions to job creation and infrastructure. However, social benefits are not equally distributed. BRI has also created wealth disparities and marginalization of rural population. Even the so-called green BRI still causes environmental repercussions, such as worsening pollution and depleting natural resources, showing that although BRI has benefit, the negative impact remains significant. In conclusion, the Belt and Road Initiative, often viewed as a development project that helps countries improve their infrastructure and economic growth. However, in reality, it brings long-term harm on borrowing countries. BRI creates economic dependency, causes political disruption, and leads to social problems such as environmental damage, health risks, and labor conflicts. Even though some may argue that BRI gives development opportunities, the negative impacts are more significant. Ultimately, development is not always good if it comes with huge amount of liabilities. A country may appear to grow to feasible infrastructure while gradually weakening economically due to the long-term debt burden. When a nation starts losing its economic independence, its sovereignty, and its citizens' well-being, then the development is a loss, not a gain. Therefore, government must be more responsible in making bilateral cooperation agreements. They should not only focus on short-term economic gains, but also carefully consider the long-term risks that may harm their country's sovereignty and society. And I will view these projects as inherently beneficial because they come with the promise of development. Government should ensure that projects with BRI truly benefit the country and its society, rather than creating dependency and hidden risks. Because in the end, projects like WUS is not just about speed or modernity. It is about the future we are building and the price we choose to ignore. In the end, when the excitement fades and the debt remains, is it truly progress or simply a price future generations will continue to repay? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian John. Our panelists today are Mr. Rio and Ms. Haiti. Let's see, how about we have Mr. Rio go first?
Hey, thank you, Brian. Thank you for this topic. This is actually an intriguing topic, yeah. I mean, like it's a high context topic actually. If you wanna, if I have to be honest. So Actually, also this topic raises an awareness that what seemingly to be a profitable and modernized transformation does not always create a long-term benefit. Yeah. But before we go to the questions, I might need to ask for your clarification regarding two things. First, in your thesis statement states that, therefore, countries should be aware of China's soft power through the Belt and Road Initiative BRI project, as it could have negative economic, political, and social consequences. According to your thesis, I just want you to clarify one thing. What is your personal stance on BRI? Do you support this project or do you oppose this project?
Uh, if this project actually doesn't cause any economic, political, or social consequences, I mean, excessively, since back again, China have this project since they have their own national interests. But then, if this economic turn into unsustainable debt, political turns into the loss of a sovereignty, and if this social actually causing labor conflicts for our country, then I don't support this BRI project.
So if that's the case, what is the main problem then to this cooperation, the BRI project? Is it China or maybe the 140 countries that sign voluntarily to this project?
Can you clarify?
So what is the major problem or the main core problem of this issue? I mean your thesis. Is it the China's project, the project itself, the BRI, or maybe the problem came from the mismanagement or the lack of the management of the 140 countries in this project?
I think it is this project is under China, therefore it's China's.
So you think that China has the role in the
Yeah, since they are the one who creates the BRI.
so the BRI itself is one of the major problem, yeah. Okay. I just need some clarification because before we go to the other questions, I need to clarify that thing. Okay, then. My second clarification is quite simple regarding your definition of hard and soft power. Yeah, you mentioned in your definition hard and soft power. What is actually, this is just want to clarify actually to the audience also so they can understand well. What differs between these two power? And what is the common goal of this power actually?
Actually, the common goal of both power is to have influence over the country. But then, what's the difference is that soft power expanded to economic, if no, not to force, but then hard power actually expands its influence to war and forces, like the United States, for example. Right now, they created war, and that's an example of hard power.
Okay, good. It means you understand well about the context or the topic well, yeah, regarding hard. They have the common goal, which is to influence. But what differs between both of them is the way how to influence the others. First, hard and soft power. Good. So BRI is part of soft power, you think. Good. Okay, now let's go to the context of the questions. In every cooperation under analysis, why these 140 countries signs the cooperation in the first place? Okay, wait, yeah. Knowing that it might harm the long-term sovereignty, as you have stated, and even the economic dominance. Do you think that these 140 countries had any interest in the programs? Or in the other word, what benefit these 140 countries get? Or maybe their governance, this 140's governance failed.
So these 140 countries actually sign agreement when BRI starts. So back again, its power to wanting to control a country's sovereignty is haven't clearly seen yet. Therefore, this country fall under it. Since at first everything was promising, like large infrastructure projects. Like which country don't want a modernized infrastructure for their own country?
So it is a bidding then. Bidding. I mean, like before the project started, China gave the proposal first. Also, that's what happened. So this is the problem that when China gave the problem first to these 140 countries, and the problem happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's okay. It's okay. I just want to ask. Okay. So, still, yeah, you still stand firm in your thesis that this is the problem is the BRI and the China itself. Yeah. Okay. So, Brian, under your analysis for BRI, yeah, do you think that China's ultimate goal is world domination?
I think in the end, it is one of China's goals since China wants to influence this country so that there are less contact opposing them in the in the UN. So I think it's one of the China's massive goal, but while also having cooperation with other countries since they need to benefit each other within those countries.
So you think that there are some one of the ultimate goal is world domination through this BRI project. Is that true? Yeah. It's okay. It's okay. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Okay, Brian again. Yeah. No. I really have interest in this. You know, I've told you once, right? So therefore, my question is quite. I mean, I need some clarification on this. Yeah. So if you think that China's ultimate goal is world domination, because I saw in your paper, in your second proof, yeah, you mentioned or discuss the trade competition between China and US. Yeah. It took me, because it relates to international relation, and that is part of that is one of my major. So I want to ask. This is my curiosity. Yeah. Before we continue, I want to ask you: do you know this concept, balance of power?
Wait,
If you don't, it's okay.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure.
Still,
Okay. So before we continue, balance of power is a situation, yeah, when a dominating country rises, another power will rise to compete. This happens in World War II, World War I. Yeah, when a major dominating power rises, another power will rise to compete. That is balance of power. When you mention US, yeah, according to this topic, there are two questions. First, is the competition between US and China could be considered as balance of power situation?
I think would consider since China is right now rising highly, while the US is also trying to fight China by using tariff and other like influences to, for example, their own infrastructure project, the PGII. Yeah.
Good. That's a good answer. Now, my last question. This is under your analysis, yeah, under your paper and under your thesis, and according to the concept that I have given you. Is US effort up until now to compete with China could be seen as justified, knowing that BRI as you said, that BRI could could lead to world domination of China. Why or why not?
I think until right now, up to now, I think it is justifiable since back again there is a balance of power will take effect. But then it becomes it becomes not justifiable if America or China actually threatens another country's stability if no like violating international laws.
Good. So you say that U.S. effort in any way still justifiable?
Unless if it starts to take another country's
Sovereignty.
then it is not.
So all right. Okay. That's
Okay,
it.
we need to move
Thank
to
you.
Ms. Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. Okay, Ryan John, congratulations for completing your thesis. Yeah, you don't seem nervous. I think, yeah, you look confident, so good job. So basically, I found at least 2 or 3 questions that have been asked by Mr. Rio. Yeah, so we have the same question, but it's okay. So I have other question, yeah. So because you mentioned about WUS at the first oration, right? So I'm going to ask you about. So WUS is as the one example of BRI.
BRI.
Okay. So what evidence that you have that can prove WUS function as a soft power rather than only economic cooperation?
So I would like to clarify. So, on what way is WUSH seen as a soft power?
Yeah, not
since-
only economic cooperation between China and Indonesia.
Since WUSH can be seen as a soft power, since right now even with the WUSH projects, China's also offer a new agreement for extending the WUSH into Surabaya. It's just a plan that haven't been. But then, so it is since that once a project enter, China will start influencing, if no, asking those countries to have another new infrastructure projects under their loan.
Is it because China asked Indonesia to build another rail, or Indonesia needs to improve the infrastructure, also improve the economically?
I think both sides taking effect since Indonesia need to improve the infrastructure. However, if what I research is that if WUSH expanded to Surabaya, I think we have a better interest rate. If not, we can adjust the debt with China.
Okay, so was Indonesia economically and strategically ready for WUS? What do you think?
I think to talk about that, right now it is balanced between the cost and benefit since the benefit is that it actually improves infrastructure projects for Indonesia, which also helps local industries like from Bandung and Jakarta companies to go. But then the cost is that it's still more massive since the debt itself that WUSH have is around $7.4 billion USD, which right now Indonesia even is estimated to repay those loans in 60 years ahead. So due to the long debt, and then even it also affects the plan to affect the APBN around 1.2 trillion rupiah in per year for the WUSH obligation. So I think it is the cost.
Okay, so I'm going to also have a question related with your thesis statement because Mr. Yo have asked before, yeah, but I just need a clarification about this word. So because you said therefore countries should be aware of China's soft power. Now what do you mean by aware?
So the Belt and Road Initiative is a soft power. Therefore, countries should be aware since there are some countries like Sri Lanka who actually didn't see this soft power and fall under it. However, I think Indonesia is one of the countries that actually is aware of of the soft power since it doesn't really fall under the BRI entirely since Indonesia still have like cooperation with China, not Sri Lanka who actually at the end leads the Hambantota Port, which is one of the major key assets.
So maybe it's more to like knowing the pro and cons and then make sure that we are ready for any burden ahead. That's what you mean by aware.
We are aware.
Okay, so I'm curious about this. Can the BRI or any agreements, but now we're talking about BRI, be negotiated or mainly controlled by China?
I think to answer that, BRI is mostly under China. Therefore, actually, if a countries want to improve, they should create a new agreements, not under BRI, but then between a bilateral cooperation. Since, like Japan, for example, they created a new agreement, EQPI, which emphasizes the transparency, which is much better than falling under the BRI agreement.
Because you mentioned about Japan, that's my follow-up question. So I'm just curious that what gives Japan has the ability to promote or propose initiative like the EQPI itu rather than just following what China has made.
I think it's back again since Japan is one of the developed countries, but then Indonesia can also do the same since what I research is that China relies on Indonesian nickel to to create or if not to build the EV electric vehicle. So therefore, I think Indonesia have this political power also to create a new agreement.
Because Japan already have a power and they also not developing countries,
Yeah,
but okay. So you said that the one of bad impact of BRI is countries have a long-term debt, right? And my question is, do you? I think it's almost the same like Mr. Yo's question, but I have to ask this: do you think the main problem with BIR is that participating countries become too dependent on China, or that they are unable to prepay the loans? What's the main problem in BRI? Is it
Oh.
because they cannot pay the loans, long-term debt, or they become dependent full to China?
I think we can see that it's also dependent since BRI is also soft power, where Chinese projects eventually enter to those countries, which affect those countries' independency since countries become dependent. But then whether a country is capable of not, I think, whether a country is capable of not of repaying those loans, I think it's back to the government's decision since like Indonesia, WUSH loans is actually still we can still pay the WUSH loan since our DSR is not that high.
Okay. So both are the main problem, basically. Okay. So my last question. So China, we know that they have the power, right, to influence many countries. Betul ya? Yeah, is that right? So, for example, to one of their project, which is BRI. So, and this can be seen as a privilege China earned after decades of developing the economic and their position, right? So do you think there is anything wrong with China having that power? Because not all countries have a power like China, right? Do you think is there any problem from having that kind of power? If not, ideally, how should China use the power?
I think it is ideal for China to have those power unless if those power actually threatens another, threatens another country's sovereignty, if not causing too much economic dependency on another country, then that power is better for China to readjust since it affects other country negatively.
Okay, so by having that power, I think there's nothing wrong having the power, but how to use it, basically. Okay. Thank you, Brian John. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, we have a couple more minutes. Let me ask you a couple of questions here. So, your thesis is about countries should be aware, right, of China's Belt and Road Initiative and their soft power. Do you think really that Indonesia, when they contracted with China to do the WUSH and other projects, were they not aware, or were they aware and they chose to do it anyway? And if so, what do you think their thinking was? Why did Indonesia do this, even though there's this threat of soft power?
I think Indonesia wanted a WUSH since it actually makes an agreement, if not like work together with China, so that they can work together. But then whether the countries are aware or not, I think it's back to the government itself.
Okay, and so from the beginning, I think, wasn't it true that when the WUSH was designed, wasn't there like a bidding between China and Japan or something like that?
Yes.
And so why did Indonesia choose China instead of Japan? Was it all about what China was going to give them, or what?
So since Indonesia choose China other than Japan, since China offer a B2B schemes while those debt doesn't really burden right away to the Indonesia's national budget. However, Japan wants clarity, so they ask Indonesia to pay the debt from the national budget, which actually affects the national budget freedom. But then another case is that even though, back to the.
Okay, one last question. Is there any reason to worry that China's soft power will turn into hard power when they really need Indonesia, either the land or the economics, whatever it is. Or is there a worry that the soft power will turn hard?
Actually, since from cases like Sri Lanka, Samboto Tapon, those soft power actually means soft power, but then why did China force the Hambantota Topo to be released is due to the agreements rather than by using force like to war, but they instead already stated on the agreements itself.
Okay, time is up. Good job, Brian. All right, great. So what we'll do now is friends, family, panelists, advisor will meet over here.